want to start by saying I am not someone who scares easily. I'm a paramedic. I've worked night shifts in some of the worst neighborhoods in the city. I've seen things that would keep most people awake for weeks. I tell you this not to brag, but because what I'm about to describe still scares me. 8 months later, and I'm not sure it will ever stop. It started in October. My buddy Marcus asked me to house sit while he was in Portugal for 2 weeks. Big house, nice street, quiet neighborhood, easy job. I'd done it before. I said yes without thinking twice. I should have thought twice. The first few days were fine. I worked my shifts, came back to the house, made dinner, watched the game, went to bed. It's a 3-bedroom place, way too big for one guy, but comfortable. Marcus had left everything neat. He's like that. On day 4, I noticed the kitchen chair. It was pulled out from the table, not far, maybe 6 inches, facing the hallway. I pushed it back in. Figured I'd knocked it on my way out that morning. Long shifts. You stop paying attention to small things. On day 5, it was pulled out again. Same chair, same angle, facing the same hallway. I texted Marcus, asked if he had a cleaner coming, a neighbor with a key, anyone. He said no. The spare key was in a lockbox, and only the two of us knew the code. He laughed and told me I was probably sleepwalking. Said I'd mentioned it once years ago after a rough week of night shifts. I let it go. 2 more days passed without anything strange. I started to agree with him. Sleepwalking, stress, 48-hour weeks. Perfectly reasonable. Then I found the mug. It was sitting on the counter next to the kettle. White mug, blue rim, Marcus's. I hadn't used it. I drink coffee, not tea. There was a dried ring inside it, like someone had filled it and let it sit. The tea bag was in the sink, wet, recently used. I had been at work for 12 hours. I had not made tea. I checked every door, every window. Everything was locked. No sign of forced entry. No sign anyone had been inside. The alarm log, not triggered once. I called my brother. He told me to call the police. I felt stupid calling the police over a moved chair and a teacup. So I didn't. Instead, I bought a cheap doorbell camera, set it up facing the hallway, and went to bed telling myself I'd have an answer by morning. I checked the footage first thing. 8 hours of an empty hallway. Nothing. No movement. No shadow. The chair was exactly where I'd left it the night before. I felt like an idiot. I almost deleted the app. Almost. Day 9. I was running late for a shift, rushing through my morning routine. I grabbed my toothbrush. Blue, mine, always on the left side of the holder, and that's when I saw it. There was a second toothbrush in the holder. Red, not Marcus's. He uses an electric one and took it with him. This was a cheap manual toothbrush, the kind you grab at a pharmacy for $2. It hadn't been there the night before. I know this because I'm careful about my space when I'm staying somewhere that isn't mine. Paramedics notice details. It's the job. I touched it with one finger. It was wet. Not damp from the day before. Wet. Recently used. The bristles still soft from water. Someone had brushed their teeth in that bathroom while I slept. I did not go to work that day. First time I'd called in sick in 4 years. I searched that house room by room. Every cupboard, every wardrobe, under every bed. I pulled back the shower curtain. I checked the attic hatch. Dust on the frame, undisturbed. The basement, same. Nothing. No one. The house was empty, but here is what I did find. In the back of the guest bedroom wardrobe, behind a stack of Marcus's winter coats, there was a folded blanket on the floor. Not storage folded, flat and compressed the way you store something for months. This was folded the way you fold something you use and then put away quickly. The kind of fold that means, I'll need this again tonight. Underneath it was an empty water bottle and a phone charging cable plugged into the wall socket inside the wardrobe. Someone had been living in that wardrobe, charging their phone, sleeping on that floor, 10 feet from the bed I was sleeping in. I called the police. This time I didn't hesitate. I stood outside on the front step, and I did not go back inside until 2 officers had swept the building. They found nothing. No person. No new evidence beyond what I showed them. The blanket, the cable, the toothbrush, which I'd been careful not to touch again. One of the officers, older guy, calm in the way people get calm after too many years on the job, told me what I was already starting to understand. Someone had been living in that house, possibly for a long time. They knew the layout. They knew my schedule. They hid when I was home and moved through the house when I slept or left for work. He called it a ghost tenant. Said it happened more than people realized. People living in houses undetected for weeks, sometimes months. I'm a paramedic. I've walked into scenes most people couldn't imagine. And standing on that doorstep, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt genuinely afraid. I called Marcus in Portugal. He picked up on the second ring, already awake even though it was early there. When I told him what had happened, there was a silence on the line that lasted too long. Then he said, "Was it a red toothbrush?" He knew. He already knew. He told me then, voice dropping, stumbling over the words, that 3 months before he left for Portugal, he'd started finding things out of place in the house. A chair moved, a glass he hadn't used. He hadn't told anyone because he thought he was losing his mind. He'd convinced himself it was stress. He'd almost convinced himself completely. He told me he'd seen a shadow once. End of the upstairs hallway, 2 in the morning. He'd blinked and it was gone. He'd gone back to bed and never spoken about it to anyone. He had asked me to house sit because he didn't want to be there alone. He hadn't told me why. My best friend of 15 years had sent me into that house knowing something was wrong, and he hadn't said a word. The police reviewed my doorbell camera footage more carefully than I had. I'd only checked the night of the toothbrush. They went back further. On night 6, 2 nights before I found the toothbrush, at 4:11 in the morning, the camera picked up a figure moving through the hallway, walking slowly, unhurried, completely at ease in a house that wasn't his. Tall, male, dark clothes, moving toward the kitchen. He walked past the camera without looking at it, like he knew exactly where it was and had already decided it wasn't a problem. Like he'd been there long enough that nothing in that house surprised him anymore. The timestamp showed I had been asleep in the bedroom 15 feet away. I watched that clip 4 times. Each time I felt sicker than the last. They never caught him. I want to be straight about that. There was a full investigation. Forensics found prints in the wardrobe and the bathroom, DNA on the toothbrush. There was a match. A man with a prior conviction for stalking, released 18 months earlier. A restraining order from a previous case. A listed address that turned out to be abandoned. He was never found. What the detectives told me, and this is the part I think about most, is that based on the evidence, he had likely been living in that house for at least 6 weeks before I arrived. He knew the layout. He knew the routines. By the time I moved in, he had been watching Marcus for over a month. When I showed up, he simply adjusted. He learned my schedule instead. He had 9 days of data on me before I found the toothbrush. 9 days of me thinking I was alone in that house. 9 nights of him sleeping 10 feet away from me. I didn't go back to that house. Marcus sold it 5 months later. He told me he couldn't walk through the rooms without mapping out where the guy had been standing, watching him cook, watching him watch TV, watching him go to bed. I understood completely. I still do. I sleep with the lights on now. I know how that sounds coming from a paramedic. I know it's not rational. But the mind doesn't always take orders from logic, especially once it's learned that it can be wrong about something as basic as, am I alone right now? What I keep coming back to, and I don't think I'll ever fully shake it, is not the fear I felt after finding out. It's the 9 days before. The 9 days of making dinner, watching the game, brushing my teeth, falling asleep, living my completely normal life in a house that was not empty. The fear isn't in the knowing. The fear is in all the time before the knowing. And the question it leaves behind, what else don't you know right now? If you're watching this late at night, alone, I'm not going to tell you to go check every room. I'm sure you're fine. I was just unlucky. But I'll leave you with something the detective told me that I haven't been able to forget. He said, if you ever feel like you're being watched inside your own home, you probably are. The human brain evolved to detect presence. We're wired for it. Most people dismiss that feeling as anxiety, paranoia, overactive imagination. He said most people are right to dismiss it. He said most. Sleep well.